Professor Michael Targan, Professor Graham, and all friends and colleagues and also relatives as a KP Joel. It's a privilege and a great honor to be invited here. I'm not sure that I'm worthy of all these fine words and your fantastic welcome, but let me try to share some of my thoughts. Professor George KK from here on. First time we met was on almost 32 years. We were both staying in the CBS guest house and fighting mosquitoes and discussing the viability of the Kerala model. And the main message from KK to me was that many groups continue to demand welfare and education. The support for that is still there, but it often generates commercial, not productive investments. And when it does, it is mainly elsewhere and for individual purposes. Hence, he said Kerala's social democratic human development is, or was at that time, in fiscal crisis. He kept saying to me that, the Nehruvian raw material and feudal-based import substitution development strategy was never an option in Kerala. And it has now been, at that point of time, when we met, it has now been overtaken by neoliberalism. So he said the human development model must be upgraded with investments in education and skills that promotes production and thus based ventures in the dynamic economy. At the time when we were talking, the KSSP's local participatory development projects to engage people and deepen democracy was going on, and it was that which had brought me to Kerala to study. According to KK, said they are insufficiently linked to the dynamic economy beyond the local levels and to the people from the local level who work in the broader economy. We continue to discuss with others, including Michael Tarkan, about how sustainable development could be generated with democratic means by way of as much socio-economic equity and education as possible for all practical purposes, the essence of social democracy then. And about what could be learned by comparing the common aims and needs in different contexts, including also, as all cases as Kerala and Scandinavia. Over the years, there was the development of a kind of framework of broadly defined social democracy, irrespective of party labels. No matter whether they were calling themselves social democrats like in Scandinavia or reformist communists in some other countries, the essence could be boiled down to two pillars to enable change, namely collective interest-based democratic movements and equal humanity and citizen-based democracy. And then two policy pillars, universal welfare and education, and social economic growth pacts between negotiated class struggle between capital and labor. And then by way of, how will this be implemented by way of 5 strategies? First, you dismantle reckless capitalism from above. You win election and you try to dismantle it from above. You win election, you try to tame it from above. You can resist it from below. You can try to escape it from below. You don't need to be a hippie to do that. You can form cooperatives and self-managed units and so on. And fifth, which was missed by many who have written about this, but became very crucial in Scandinavia, not least, you can try to transform it by altering the rules of the game and strengthening the agents of change. You don't tame capitalism, you transform it. There's a difference between, taming a wolf and breeding it into a working dog, if you get the point. My own research confirmed and supplemented Keike's, and I shall argue the following. First, that Keike's argument about the Kerala model really helps to identify the options and challenges of social democracy, not just in Kerala, but in the global south at large. And I should also say that his focus on investments in more productive knowledge and links between the local and the dynamic wider economy, in a way, it has now been accepted, not least by the recent focus on knowledge-based development. But I should also argue that the importance of renewed political agency and governance has been set aside. From that point of view, it's crucial to counter the problems of what some people have called competitive welfarism, paternalistic competitive welfarism, and the financial crunch by, I would argue, scaling up democratic movement politics to foster more participatory, what I would call mission politics. And secondly, to facilitate investments through democratic economic ventures without formal state loan guarantees. I'll come back to that. And I would also argue engaging in renewed internationalism against the global conservative nationalism that also undermine Kerala's social and economic development. So firstly then, KK and many others, including Professor Tarakan, contributed to the critique of the conventional truth that social democracy was and is impossible in itself. The argument used to be that this was impossible because of colonialism, uneven development, and divisive class structures, and limited democratic space. And they and others showed how Kerala, quite to the contrary of this, from the 1930s, proved that in spite of the multiculture of Kerala and so many complicated social structures, united struggle was possible for equal human and civil rights, health and education, land reform, workers' rights, and of course national independence and unified Kerala. And that it was possible to organize informal labor on the basis of professional labor market control. And that it was possible, even in poor state, to remove chronic poverty and endemic deprivation if the investments in human capital fostered growth. And that it was possible to coordinate this by democratic education, mobilization, organization and governance. State capacity and anti-imperialism did not require authoritarianism. Kerala stood tall even from the 50s and 70s when most other left-oriented countries and regions downgraded the importance of democracy. But they also showed, these mentors are mine, they also showed how the model stagnated from the 60s onwards. Education was insufficiently democratized, of course. Vulnerable sections of the population were excluded in the land reform. The implementation of the land reform was not combined with democratic decentralization. Political patronage and clientelism evolved, though you could say it was more plural than in West Bengal, but anyway. There were insufficient productive investments after the land reform. Much of the gains from investments in human capital and education and skills was not invested productively in Kerala, as Keke proved. And thus it was also hard to gain more tax from it. Benefits were mainly individual. And that fitted well with India's new liberalization from the 80s and onwards. So radical politics of development was undermined and the economy stagnated, even though it was masked by the remittances. My own research and many others also showed that the impressive People Science Movement campaigns, along with Partners for United Participatory Local Development, behind missions and projects, that it really shaped new democratic spaces. That was actually why I kept coming back to Kerala in a way. It was a remarkable place in the early 80s, one of the few places I come across where there were really new thinking and new attempts going on. It shaped new democratic spaces beyond the entrenched organizations and their patronage and clientelism, beyond the stalled state-level social growth, attempted state-level social growth pacts. And they also showed that it was possible to scale up local efforts in the state at large. Not just scattered initiatives, but to scale it up. And that was possible when numerous local showcases could be combined from the 94-96 in a new framework for how to compensate for the lack of decentralized participatory implementation of land reform and to thus renew the Kerala model. And it was possible when critical mass activists and supporters pushed for the alternative framework from outside as well as from inside mainstream political organizations, contributed to an electoral victory in 1996. And it was possible when democratic decentralization was added to these initiatives and made it possible to combine direct popular participation and local democratic representative government and governance. Not just civil society activism, but in a combined with the democratically elected governments and administrations. And when then 1/3 of the planning budget could be transferred to the local institutions and when it could be directed in favor of participatory development to the state planning board. At the same time, however, I was among those who also argued that there were certain main problems and that they were about democratic agency and governance. Lots of the new resources were there, but mainly provided of that. There were less local resource mobilization and taxation. Group farming, if you remember, that remained through state departments, through the departments and not part of the local initiatives. The same thing applied to the resource mapping. So the resource mapping was never sort of fully integrated on the local level. Was never really anchored in the local government and governance. It was brilliant with direct democracy and more people involved, but the links with representative democracy and governance remained blurred and never really handled and solved. The same committee never arrived at a firm conclusion on this. And the same problem applied to the linkages between the local and the state. If we have a broader comparative perspective, there was less focus on meritocracy, professionalism, than on political linkages. And there was no Chinese-like bonus for fostering local economic development that has proved so crucial in the Chinese economic development, for good and for bad. We have an unresolved inclusion of middle classes and educated youth issues. What was in it for them? many unemployed youth ask me that when I visit villages and campaign meetings. What's in it for us? There were good results when it comes to public service and partly in agriculture. That's of course the Kudumbashi group. But not really production through the local growth packs. That was the dream. We should get down to the base level. We should make a new attempt to form growth packs if we labour and capital, small scale capital on local level, but really didn't took off. And we had this unresolved coordination of local and outside economic dynamics that KK had emphasized to me already in 1993 at some point, as CSES. And then, of course, the unresolved inclusion of, if you like, old interest organization, which had state local linkages, but didn't fit into this new framework. And sometimes felt that who's now coming in and taking over from us? And the parties, of course, where some people said, are you going to take over from us? And in the end, we had this unfortunate party hijacking of much of the activities in 2000-2001 election. Fortunately, some of these hurdles were addressed from around 2016. There were a number of institutional reforms carried out finally, you could say. I mean, much of what the Senate committee should have done much earlier was now done. That stabilized and centralized governance and popular participation could be combined in a better way. And I think that proved really crucial in the fighting of the floods in 2018-19, as well as in the initial phases of the pandemic, when it really proved that, you know, the cooperation between system-based activities in various ways and the local administration, local government was so crucial. I could tell you within brackets, we never achieved anything of that kind in Scandinavia, but you managed to do it here. And it was crucial here now that now the links between the local and the state level was strengthened. You had more state welfare resources coming in to protect people. You could say it was paternalistic to a certain extent, but at least that link was emphasized. And you could develop a number of missions to support local level governance and actions like for housing. And of course, more external resources for infrastructure. So and then during COVID, of course, this was facilitated or made easier by the general worldwide acceptance for spending more money. Suddenly, for a brief period of time, most part of the world turned Keynesian. So then you had this to upgrade the Kerala model, in a way I would argue, much like KP had suggested. A statewide framework for socially responsible knowledge-based development was initiated, including with change to local level production services and skills, not just on the top level, but also with linkages to the local. And there was more emphasis on attracting private directed investment, but not as reckless as earlier in West Bengal. And by attracting investment in state-controlled guaranteed investment fund. I think that was a remarkable initiative. Really thinking out of the box. And you got the electoral successes in 20 and 21. But certain earlier problems seem to remain unaddressed, at least as far as I can see. We have weakened and more fragmented popular actors, trade unions and similar groups are coming down and it's getting more fragmented. So how do we promote more unified collective action for certain programs and policies, where we involve old as well as new social movements and wider sections of the population? That issue is, of course, not particular for Kerala. It's a worldwide problem, but nevertheless something which is a problem and a major task. And how does one then avoid this competitive paternalistic welfare thing that when the Prime Minister is sort of offering welfare in a paternalistic way, there is a temptation to do something similar on the other side. And what will that lead to? It's a models. So combining kind of populist and clientelist perspective, which is of course devastating in the long run. So, and how to scale up the combination of direct and representative democracy in new links between state and local and between public and private investment. That has never been solved. Not even in Brazil, with this also very impressive participatory budgeting. Huge numbers of people were participating in this participatory budgeting, but that didn't make them able to contain the corruption that was going on in Brazil, in the capital, and which finally overthrew the first Lula government. And how to develop ways of overcoming the fiscal crunch. How to do that in additional ways, alternative ways, in addition, of course, to the demands for more fair sharing of central fiscal resources. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe many of these things are handled informally, and I haven't been able to keep track of it sitting on the other side of the earth. But please tell me about it. But there seems to be some increasing worries, including with administrative capacity, centralist tendencies, paternalism, and personalized leadership. More specifically, what I can see from outside, there have not been any substantial discussion about governance, including formats for popular partnership representation and governance in the missions, and how to combine state and private cooperation. You know, I'm reading, of course, from the proceedings from the Kerala Looks Ahead conference, various plans and budgets, papers, discussion about innovation and attraction of private direct investments, as well as priorities and projects of KIFBI, and how the discussion has been going on for handling the hindrances on finance from New Delhi. And I haven't seen anything on how to fight globalized conservative nationalism, which the Modi regime is part of, and undermines Kerala's external-oriented knowledge-based development. If the entire world turned into a second Cold War on nationalism, that external-oriented economy that is, in a way, a basis for the ideas of knowledge-based economy, would suffer. Now, fortunately, Kerala is not an authoritarian governmental state, either as China or Singapore. But since you are not, it's crucial with alternative democratic partnership, governance and coordination. It can't be handled by a party. It can't be handled without some kind of cooperation if you are not going to turn into an authoritarian developmental state. So the question is, are there any ideas based on comparative historical experiences on how to move ahead with this? And I'm getting nervous because I'm going to stick out my neck by asking if there would be an interest in discussing this in more detail during a few weeks of my stay with CSES and Gulati Institute. And let me put forward 5 points. Maybe you could respond on them. The first point relates to policy-based, mission-driven policies. It's easy to put up a mission, as done in this state and in many other countries, but it's more difficult to build up alliances behind the missions and partner representations in them with councils, etc. In Brazil now, during the new Lula government, the local participatory budgeting has been scaled up through thematic policy conferences on higher levels. In Scandinavia, for another case, there are historical experiences of partner representation in boards and reference groups, etc. The second point is democratic partnership representation in links between public and private, which is the essence of this democratic corporatism in Scandinavia, which has developed, but which is now falling apart. And that also applies to the relations between local and central. When Kerala governments guarantee on investment loans in strategic sectors, when that has been possible to hinder by New Delhi, what do we do then? What shall we do? What shall we happen to this? Well, maybe it would be possible to initiate facilitation consultation with major actors or cooperatives and employee-owned and managed firms in strategic sectors. So, theoretically, skilled staff could hire capital instead of capital hiring the skilled staff, with the firms as collateral for loans and investments. So, in essence, economic democratization plus company loans instead of state loans. Are you aware of the fact that Volvo, you know the Volvo car, the entire company was about to be taken over by the employees before the Chinese did. It was a realistic proposal, but it wasn't supported not even by the trade unions in Sweden, but it was a possibility, could have happened. As a further compensation for weak tax capacity, these and other facilitated firms could perhaps be obliged to contribute to funds for common and societal purpose, from health and research and education to infrastructure, particularly in knowledge-based industries that need those collective solutions to profit. That could be, such schemes could benefit from the experiences of wage earners funds, which in this case, of course, could also be supplemented with the representation of others who are not just like workers. Pensioners and retired people have to be represented among others. Finally, Narendra Modi is not the only that causes trouble for Kerala. The rise of conservative nationalism on a global scale as a reaction to global neoliberalism, shallow democracy and underlying progressive alternatives, that tendency is global. It's nothing happening all just in the United States or in Eastern Europe or even in France, Scandinavia. I could tell you more about that. Aside from its reactionary character, it reduces the world economic dynamic. I'm not saying we should return to any kind of neoliberal globalization, but this nationalism is very dangerous at this great moment. It's a conservative nationalism. And it's reducing the possibility for Canada to develop knowledge-based economic development. How would one do that? How would one engage in that? Well, there are efforts at pushing along the line internationalism with like-minded. Lula is one of them who pushes it. That might be a possible route to mobilize possible supportive regulations against great power dominance, and for trade regulations and more favorable international finance of alternative products. And to say the United Nations principles instead of opening up for strongman rule around the world. And to thus be able to handle the climate changes and sustain and further develop struggle for human rights and democracy. This calls for international cooperation, and I think therefore Kerala could, I think in that respect, Kerala, in its own interest, might be interested in more internationalism, even with some Northern partners. Thank you.